you this morning. So Tracy has been moved to our April meeting. And Miss Tara, as always, she comes up with something that can fill a little bit of a spot. So this morning in Tracy's place, Dr. Tara Haskins is going to share the AgriSafe's new depopulation page. And then when Tara finishes, Miss Kristen Powers has been kind enough that she said she will fill in the rest of the hour with the Benevolence Farm. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so that Miss Tara can go ahead and talk to us about our new depopulation page that we have up on the website. All right, Miss Tara, you can take it away.
Thank you so much, Carrie. And I just want to say to everybody, thank you so much for staying engaged with the Mental Health Innovation Exchange. Carrie's done a wonderful job of growing this. And last year, we had over 700 attendances to this, to this event alone, and then almost equally the same number of views of the recordings. So if you find value in this, you have new interns, students, new employees who have, please encourage them to join. They might be able to make a partnership with someone with a great project. There may be opportunities for grant fundings between collaborators that you meet on this web offering. And also, always, right, Carrie? If you have a project and don't think it's too small, if it has anything to do that supports mental well-being in agriculture, whatever that angle is, please reach out to Carrie. She's always looking for innovation. She's looking for really interesting projects. And as we've had in the past, age is not necessarily a factor because we've actually had a high school student, right, Carrie, that shared her project. And I know that when we can support those really, young ag youth that are looking at moving into this space as a career in ag education or whatever, it really gives them a great opportunity to share their passion, share their project. And no doubt it probably helps them on their college applications, right, Carrie?
Yes, absolutely, it does.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I'm going to share my page. I was really excited. We were down to the wire this morning getting this all set up. And I want to share with you our animal depopulation training. I'm not going to provide the training today, but I do want to share with you what we're doing in this space. So you are now looking at AgriSafe's homepage, and Vanessa did some magic and she got this placed on the front page as one of our featured trainings now. This is hot off the press. It just went live yesterday. So a little bit of background on this animal depopulation resiliency. Years ago, actually, it's amazing that it was a couple of years ago, I stumbled upon some work from Dr. Elizabeth Strand and did a training. And it was, she's actually a social worker, an agricultural social worker. And she had developed a tool that helps individuals that are working on depopulation situations to kind of help manage the stress that exists around that work. It's very complex. The training goes into detail of why this is an issue and why we might need to support one another, not only for the producer and the farm worker, but also for those professionals that may be sent to farms that have to make hard decisions and give really bad news to producers. It could be people in the community certainly are impacted by this when they hear of an outbreak. And this all sort of stems around those zoonotic diseases, primarily avian influenza, which, hey, we're getting close to spring. I'm down here in Louisiana and we're starting to warm up now that we've had our big thaw. And so migration is going to be starting soon. And we usually see two big flushes of this avian influenza that happens as a result of migration. So right now you can find our page here at this spot. But if you also, if it changes out and we try to keep this front page fresh, you can also find it under this animal depopulation resiliency training page. And from this page, you can get pointed to some direct resources, some really great ones that we have. This takes you directly to some of our free printable resources. These were done in collaboration with CS Cash, and so you will see their logo at the bottom of this page. And we just actually worked in collaboration with CS Cash, and we did 2 webinars with them looking at panels. If you did not listen to those panels, I highly encourage you. And maybe Laura, maybe you can find a link to those. We had experts in depopulation. We had individuals that were speaking on behalf of the ag producers, how you can engage with them around this topic. This also has the scanning tool for the Depopulation Resiliency check-in tool that was developed by Dr. Elizabeth Strand. There are a lot of resources available for that. And what the training does is we really focus on the psychological effects and how you can mitigate that during the work, both before, during, and after. Number one, using a team approach, a debriefing approach, using the tool. And it also gives some additional resources for whoever joins the training of some things to kind of do personal check-ins as well. We go into details of how to use the tool. We also go through the tool step by step and address any questions. But this is a great way of enhancing a team's effort to keep everyone safe. Our first foray into this training was a couple of years ago with the Animal Plant Health Inspection Services. Linda Emanuel and I, shown down here in the bottom, we are right now the 2 trainers for this training. We went to Pennsylvania and we did a day-long workshop with those individuals because they were finding that their teams, who are oftentimes deployed, multiple deployments away from family for a very long time, were also starting to feel and see the stress in those professionals. As you can imagine, this can be a very emotional time when you're away from your support system. That just is another layer of risk for those individuals. So if you're interested in what a training like this, if you want one for your group or right now we don't have one scheduled on our webinar, but you can reach out to me and we can see what it would take to bring a training. Who is it good for? It's anybody that works in ag, producers. Some of the materials that we share are free from our website. Once you do a training, we can do it both in person and virtual. Like we said here, no clinical background is really required. So we invite you to kind of explore this if you have any thoughts on this. I wanted to be very clear on this page. This is not about the technical aspect of animal or poultry depopulation. We leave that to the experts that come to farms and do those trainings. This is really just about psychological safety in a very stressful event, and how we can support the ag workers, the people that serve them, as well as the community around them. And so with that, I'll take any questions, Carrie, if anybody has a question about that.
Yeah, feel free to unmute. Otherwise, I will watch the chat as well.
Mm-hmm.
Let me pull the chat up here. We have lots of new ones this month. I'd love to see that.
That is fantastic.
Okay, so far I don't see anything in the chat. Does anybody have any questions that they want to unmute for? Are you planning to offer a virtual training anytime in the future? Do you have anything kind of scheduled?
So we don't have anything like for a free offering of this. Right now, we're sort of fielding this through groups. As you can see down here, certain poultry groups have reached out to us, and the Ohio Poultry Association was our first commodity group that came to us. We did one for their membership, and then in that agreement with them, they have access to that for up to a year on our Learning Lab. The So that online offering. But certainly stay abreast. If we get any grant funding that we could offer one of these online, we certainly will. It takes several of us, usually myself and Linda, so that's two trainers, which makes this a really much more dynamic training. And Linda can also kind of lend her producer hat to that training so that because she certainly understands all of those stressors. She lives that every day. So no, we don't have anything planned now, but surely we are always looking for funding opportunities to be able to offer this on a wider scale and do a live virtual.
Yeah. And as you guys know, funding right now is difficult, so we're going to just keep crossing our fingers.
Right, right. I do. Laura, did you put the links to those panel discussions in the chat that
Uh,
we
you just wanted the one that was Elizabeth Strand?
No, no, what I
Oh,
wanted was the ones we did with CS Cash, the two panel discussions on avian influenza.
I'll go look those up.
Right. Those just happened. And so we're trying to make this easier for our audience. You can go and listen to it. I attended both of them, and it was interesting for me as a public health professional to hear the perspective of what our producers are thinking when people are coming onto their farms, um, and having to make those decisions. So look for that. Look for that in the chat.
Yeah, Laura will go ahead and post that link, and then you guys can click on it while Kristen is talking.
And that
Um,
viewing is free. The panels should be available for viewing for free. And it doesn't approach the content that we have in the depopulation resiliency training, but I think it'll give you a nice perspective on what we're seeing now with our producers and the professionals that are working in the space.
yeah, and it looks like she has both Roundtable 1 and Roundtable 2 there in the chat for you guys.
Great, great. And
And that is something too that
yeah,
maybe we can send out in our email
mhm.
with
I
our
think CS,
speakers.
yeah, I think CS Cash would really appreciate a little bit more promotion of that. So,
Yeah, definitely we'll do that.
all
All
right.
right. So it doesn't look like I have anything else in the chat. Anybody need to unmute? All right. As
Yes, ma'am. I
always,
have a question real quick.
go ahead.
This is my first time attending this. Agricultural and animal science runs pretty deep in my family. My daughter is a junior in high school, and I just want to make sure that I understood as far as she can do presentations. Uh,
Um, mm. Yes. So, as an example, just so you kind of understand what we do when we reach down into that ag youth in the high school sector, we always vet their project. And
okay,
this young lady had done a project where she created a video that talked about her growing up in agriculture and the stress that she was seeing within her family members. It was personal, but it spoke to the current situation that we see. And I believe she did that project as part of was it a school project, Carrie?
Yeah, I think it was like FCCLA.
Yes, yes. So yeah, we welcome that. We certainly will review it, make sure it's good for the space. It would be,
right,
and what we liked about that project is that the video could be shared amongst attendees, and especially if you work
right.
with youth, it's a great example of a student project. If you're working with youth, if you're teaching ag youth on, what's possible.
Yeah.
I know my
And
daughter's working on one right now, and she was asking about things such as this to get information.
Yeah.
She was wanting to do a speech for mental health in agriculture.
Oh, okay. Well,
So,
that's great. We did have a young student. Actually, I follow him on LinkedIn now. I'm trying to think. His name is Carson. And we did a small project with him early on when I first came on to AgriSafe. He had a videotaped speech that he had done in a competition. It was talking about mental health and agriculture. And we actually featured him in one of our trainings as an example on the youth content of, what youth are capable in leading. And it was a youth voice. So it makes a lot of sense. So just have her reach out to us, can reach out to me. If it has to do with mental health, just have her reach out to me and we can take a look at what she's got.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Great.
Wonderful. Love to hear that. All right, so we are going to switch over to Miss Kristen Powers. Now, Benevolence Farms was referred to me by one of our staff members, and it is, whenever I saw it, it's so unique. We've not had anything like this on here before, and I don't want to give it all away, so I'm going to let Kristen, you can go ahead and start sharing your screen and give us the lowdown on what you guys do over at Benevolence Farms.
Thank you. And just to confirm, 1 hour from this point, or I have until noon?
Until noon.
Until noon. Okay, great. All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Kristen Powers. I'm the executive director of Benevolence Farm, and I'm going to share a screen real quick. So to get right into it, the reason we exist is really based on this statistic that since the inception of the war on drugs in the United States, which started around the 1970s, the rate of women's incarceration has risen 800% nationwide. In 2026, women are still the fastest growing demographic to be incarcerated. But when you're thinking about where people go after incarceration, these numbers have not, on the reentry side, not kept up. There are not been an 800% increase at all in options to support women when they are coming home from incarceration. And women are often, we talk about men's incarceration, are usually considered this unofficial reentry system. A lot of men will return home to the women in the community who provide housing, like a grandmother, a mother, a sister. But when women come home, usually their family systems have collapsed, and they often don't have anywhere to return to. So with this statistic in mind, our founder in 2007 is a social worker, and she was talking to formerly incarcerated women about their needs coming home. And they kept saying, I need a place to live and a place to work. And she at the time was benefiting personally from a horticultural therapy program she was in. And so she thought about how to potentially combine all of these needs for housing and employment, but also these subtler comments that people were making that women were in prison, especially, they were tired of the concrete, the metal, the cold, or the extreme cold or extreme heat, that they haven't touched a plant or an animal in so many years. So while they weren't quite saying farm, she was thinking about ways to engage with nature in this design. So that's where Benevolence Farm came from in 2007. It took us a little while to get up and running, to get the land, of which you see a picture here. And our mission really is to, as you can see, cultivate leadership, promote sustainable livelihoods, and reap structural change with individuals impacted by the criminal legal system here in North Carolina, with an emphasis on rural North Carolina. If anyone is from the area or familiar, we're in the center part of the state, between Greensboro and Chapel Hill. And so this is, again, a picture of the reentry housing program we have, in a barn in the background, which I'll share more about in a second. But before we move on we're a very values-driven organization, and we talk a lot about centering the fact that as humans, as people, we are all capable of causing harm, and we will all be harmed in some way or another, but that each of us is more than the worst thing we have ever done. And we know that the conditions that often lead to someone's incarceration is not so much about the individual, but about the environment and systems and traumas that they have experienced. And if many of us were in the same shoes, we would potentially might be faced with similar experiences of policing and incarceration. And furthermore, too, we know not every type of harm is incarcerated. We have people who are dumping, corporations that might, for example, dump chemicals in a river and cause a cancer alley, who may never be held to account in the same way. So I bring this up mostly because I think a lot of shows like Law and Order, or the way we portray incarceration on TV makes it seem like a very black and white issue. This is a bad person. They go to a place for bad people. And my experience is that it's always much more complex than that. And the traumas and experiences, and the way we make up the laws too that incarcerate people. And sometimes those laws probably could take a second look at, especially I think here in North Carolina about how marijuana is still criminalized. But if you go to another state, you could go, you could be smoking marijuana on the street and not be involved in the criminal legal system. So we just shared again that to complicate the narrative because we want to kind of slow people down. Our kind of gut reaction when we think about people who are incarcerated is to be afraid. And my hope is by the end of the presentation too, we can talk, make people kind of think a little bit more about that side of things. And when we talk about our values, I mentioned at Benevolence Farm, we're thinking a lot about empathy. We talk a lot about multiple chances. Learning is that journey that sometimes requires us to make a lot of mistakes to get it right. And so as long as people are willing to continue to learn, we're happy to provide those opportunities. We talk a lot about harm reduction as well, and that can sound like a complicated concept, but if anyone drove their car today, they probably took part in one of the riskiest activities you can, which is driving, especially in some, depending on where you live, some riskier drivers than others. But you reduce the chance of harm that might happen to you in a car accident by putting on your seatbelt. And so you could say the same for like putting on a helmet when you're riding a bike. In our case, a lot of this comes up in substance use. A lot of people have substance use disorder at Benevolence Farm. So we think about, for example, someone for their whole life, we had someone who had used opioids since she was 16 every day of her life, and she was 30, and her way to step down was to smoke cigarettes. And I think some people would think, oh, that's another form of harm. That's bad. We have to stop smoking cigarettes. But for her, it was that one step, baby step at a time to stepping down from something that could kill her to immediately to something that may take a little bit more time. And so we talk about a lot how to think about harm reduction in our everyday work. We also center a lot of lived experiences. There's a saying, once you've heard, well, it applies to a lot of different identities, but once you've heard one incarcerated person's story, you've only heard one story. You have to really take the experiences across a broad set of people to understand the themes and values of how you want to use those lessons in an organization. I myself am not formally incarcerated. I've supported a loved one through incarceration. And we bring all these different experiences into the work that we do and take feedback very seriously from our residents on how to inform and improve our programming. And then we talk a lot about racial and gender equity. I've already mentioned gender equity to some degree, but we also are one of the only organizations supporting trans people in North Carolina as well, trans and gender non-binary. And that is a population that currently does not have any other options for reentry in North Carolina. And then in North Carolina specifically, Indigenous and Black women are overrepresented in the criminal legal system. So we talk a lot about how to meet the specific needs of both women and women of color. And what that looks like practically is that we are serving women and gender expansive people of all conviction types returning to North Carolina from a prison or jail. Just as a distinguishing fact, people use jail to mean prison a lot, but in fact, jail is often considered or is majority pretrial. So if you're in jail, you usually are being held there before you've been convicted of any crime. Sometimes you also serve time for a misdemeanor in jail, or you might be held in jail before transferring to a prison. But prisons are typically if you've been convicted of a felony, and you can be there for sometimes as little as 6 months, all the way up to a lifetime, or in the case of North Carolina, you may even be held on death row. So it varies. There's two types of ways we think about prison and jail and how we support people coming out of them because they are different experiences. But we serve these individuals through safe and secure housing, living wage employment, which is rooted in a farm to body care program we'll talk about in a second, and then that trauma and gender informed community support where we know we can't do this in isolation, that we have to bridge that community together in order for these first 2 points to be effective to any degree. And from this map, this is where our alumni call home. So we are this purple county right here in the middle of the state, but a lot of women from rural communities choose to come to Benevolence Farm um, before they return home to their communities after incarceration. And so typically the urban centers in North Carolina are these counties over here, or there's a small county over here, and then Charlotte is over here. And so we typically see the rural experiences and people who identify as rural community members more than urban. And so now we get to our farm location. So this is our aerial view of our 13 acres of our farm. We are about 10 minutes south of our county seat by car. But as you can see, there's not much in the neighborhood in terms of development. Um, Hopefully my internet will work out for me as I show this video. Sometimes it wants to work. But while it's thinking about working, you're seeing here our reentry housing. This is a shared housing program where we can have up to 6 people live with us at a time. I'll just share a little bit more about our housing program in a second. But we predominantly farm using a raised bed method of farming for accessibility purposes. We try to have an agribility approach. And so as the video makes its way slowly, you'll see some of those raised beds. We predominantly grow herbs and flowers, but we also grow vegetables and fruit for consumption by the residents, as well as trying to sell those products to the local community if our folks don't want it. We also have a chicken coop and a barn, and I think my video is not going to cooperate today, but I think I added a few more pictures in, although it looks like my internet is trying to get the best of me. Okay, let me give it a second to load. But you can, this is the video is still trying to, well, it froze on a picture of the garden. So you can see these raised bed systems that we use, and we try to use a variety of different agribility type tools to improve the experience of our folks. I'm gonna risk reloading my presentations to try to get these pictures. But women work on our farm 3 days a week, where they're 8 to 5 being supported in this farming program. Like I said, they learn how to grow the herbs and flowers that we then infuse into a body care product line. The other 2 days, they are working with our program staff to address their personal wellness goals and family goals, and as well as their goals for after they leave the program. And they can stay in the program for up to 2 years. So let me try to get back to these photos. Let's see if it cooperates. Okay. So again, we saw a bit of the raised beds in that last picture. This is our community advocacy director, Mona. She came home to us in 2022 before joining staff full time in 2023. But here's a picture of her in front of our echinacea bed. So Mona will tell you she is not a farmer. She is a city girl from Detroit, and she did not know anything about farming when she came. And I think she appreciated the chance to learn. She probably won't go on to be a farmer anytime soon, but now she talks about being able to at least help her kids grow plants or grow herbs in the windowsill, doing school science experiments with growing. And so, we have people who have never identified a weed from a plant in their lives. And then sometimes we have women who have grown up on a chicken farm, or worked on a lot of their grandparents' gardens or farms. And so they talk a lot about the importance of being connected to the land in that way. And so we will harvest these herbs and flowers that we grow, and we infuse them into a body care product line that we sell nationwide, and you can purchase on our website. You can also order for corporate gifting, conferences. We've done weddings before. And this is like I think a lot of our residents' favorite part of being able to create a product that people across the country are using, and to see how it went from this tiny little flower to a product that people use to heal their skin. And we have different types of products like the healing salve here, which is our most popular, but we also do soaps, some lotions, a muscle rub. And so this is part of the experience learning about workforce skills at the farm. And so when we invest in people at Benevolence Farm in this way, we do see the majority of our alumni remain in the community after 2 years. I will caveat, though, I don't think recidivism is the best way to track success, especially in given some of those environmental and legal circumstances we put people in. Most of the alumni who have returned to incarceration from our program have done so either because of a substance use relapse, which I would argue in a lot of cases could have been solved with medical intervention, or in some cases, it can be a requirement to maintain housing. And for some of our folks, especially on the sex offense registry, you cannot go to a shelter or you cannot live in a lot of different communities if you have that civil status, if you're on that civil registry. And so if you fail to maintain an address, but you cannot get into housing programs or you cannot get into find a house that will accept you for your record, you often become unhoused and then you go back to prison for being unhoused. And the majority of our alumni who have returned to prison have been for that reason or for substance use relapse. So I think it's still just, I say that because I think it points, there's probably some better ways we could solve some of the reasons people end up back in prison after not only our program, but in general. But I know with AgriSafe, thinking about how mental health factors into this, we have people of a lot of different mental health or who have different mental health diagnoses or who have different types of disabilities or again are just all of them share the trauma of incarceration on top of other traumas. And one of our alumni, she actually was on our staff now, she was telling me this yesterday that when she was at the farm about 5, 6 years ago, or well, probably 7 years at this point, she would say when she would go outside, she would pretend her mind is the garden. And in her voice, she would say, I imagine my negative thoughts are the weeds. And I sit there meditating on that as I pull them out of the ground. That's our little typo there. But the idea is that a lot of our folks do find the access to the outdoors very healing. Again, they may not always be a huge fan of gardening or farming or not so sure about it, but I have seen a lot of people, they opt to be outside even when they're not working because they can. Like when they were in prison, they could not choose to go outside at any time. We see people just sometimes laying in the grass, feeling the sun, sitting in the rocking chairs we have outside. Sometimes they will even grow their own plants. They might like create a little garden for themselves in the front yard in addition to what we grow. But this is again that hope to kind of find this healing space out of the trauma of incarceration where they can focus on their healing, where their nervous systems can regulate again, and find that little bit of like calm. We hear a lot of, I found a space to breathe is what people say a lot coming to our program because they know they're housed. They know they have food. They know where to get their food. They don't have to worry about where they're staying the next day. And with those basic needs being met, they are able to focus on those higher level goals that allow them to establish some security moving forward and be more stable and get the supports they need, especially around mental health and substance use. But this, again, is I know there's a lot of research out there about the effects of nature on people's well-being, and we see this quite a bit in our programming. I also did just want to take a second to mention that we originally started off as a shared housing model, but over the years received feedback that people felt like they needed a place to practice living independently before moving on to the community that they were choosing to relocate to. And one of our alumni, she had served she had served 27 years in prison and got out in her 60s and had never seen a cell phone. She was facing a lot of medical disabilities and had an aneurysm actually, experienced an aneurysm while she was with us in the program and then had cancer as well, which unfortunately is very common after prison for people who serve long sentences because of a lot of the toxicity that's in prison, as well as the poor food quality and lack of access to nutrition and high quality medical care. But during her time that she was with us, she talked about what would it look like to practice living alone within a community of supportive people. So, she was saying if I go into community, I'm afraid people are going to look me up or are going to judge me for why I went to prison, are going to think about that before they build a relationship with me. And I'm an elderly now, an almost elderly woman, or a woman who she did not feel very confident in her physical ability and worried about knocking on the safety of herself or knocking on the door of a neighbor asking for help. Like, why won't my oven turn on or something like that? And so she really inspired this idea for these tiny homes. And so we are in the process of building 7 of these homes on our farm property. They are designed with formerly incarcerated women's input from the very beginning. And so if you have ever seen like those HGTV tiny homes with a loft, that was one of the first pieces of feedback was no bunked beds, because that is a reminder of incarceration. Again, this kind of goes back to why it's important to center lived experiences, because people may, some assumptions might be, oh, it's efficient or faster, easier to build these lofted beds. But we have actually a tiny home with a lofted bed on our property that was donated to us. We use it as an office because so many people refuse to move into that space because of the lofted bed. So we originally thought, maybe 1 or 2 people would like to live here with when this opportunity came to the farm. But in fact, the lofted bed was such a deterrent because of kind of that trauma, the claustrophobic feeling of being up on so close to the ceiling. And then on top of that, the physical disabilities folks experience after sleeping on a metal frame for years on end with a thin mattress. There's a lot of back, hip, and leg problems that arise. And so getting up a ladder to bed was also not ideal. But here you can see that you can basically function on the first level of this home. The bed is in the first floor. There's a full bath, kitchen, and a little dining space. And then there is a loft for optional storage, but you could exist the whole time in this home without ever going into that loft. But people did say I would like a place to build up my belongings, because they come home with very little to no belongings. And so when they move to their own place, they're like, well, I would like to have some lamps, or maybe, I can find a deal at the thrift store on a carpet or something like that. I don't need it right now, but I can store it up here and move out with it when I leave. And so in November of last year, North Carolina is lucky that our new, relatively new First Lady of the state, Anna Stein, decided that reentry was going to be her focus area. She's made it her goal to visit all the prisons in North Carolina and to better, so she has a background in as a public health practitioner supporting people in substance use recovery and mental health crises. So she's there in the middle. So she joined our 2 alumni here, Linda and Mona, as well as some of the North Carolina housing partners we worked with, to break ground on this tiny home in November. And we're hoping to have ribbon cutting, if all plans go accordingly, later in the fall of this year. But with that, I know I can't see the chat going, but I'm seeing all the like comments in the chat. And so I know there might be questions, and I want to make space for that. So what I'm going to do is just again share that again, I think that a lot of people think of formerly incarcerated people or incarcerated people as, again, these like dangerous, violent people. And when you're in relationship with them, I think, like I said, the story gets a lot more complicated and a lot more obvious as to what happened to people, and why they ended up incarcerated. And so there's just a picture of a few of our alumni who are in community now. 2 of them here are pictured, our staff currently. The one in the Gabby here, that's with her. She reunited with her daughter Sky and is now remarried and owns a home in the community. And she's a hairstylist, and she comes back and actually cuts hair for women coming into our program for free. We have Danny, who is back up home in the mountains. She is unfortunately, her hometown was destroyed a lot by Hurricane Helene, a few years ago. And so her reentry plan definitely got derailed by that, but she has since been able to return home, and is with her family. We have China, and I mentioned Eden and Mona, who are on staff now. And then Linda here is now a community peer support specialist supporting other women in substance use recovery. So these are just some of the 50 plus women that have called Benevolence Farm home. And we're excited to continue to try to expand this type of work across not only North Carolina, but provide opportunities for people to learn more across the country. I always just end on this slide of ways to support Benevolence Farm. We are a nonprofit, so we always are. My staff joke that I am the money asker, that I never give a presentation without asking for money as in my role. But you can always support us financially. We do have both virtual and in-person volunteer opportunities that you can learn about by signing up on our website. Those infused body care products do sell nationwide. You can order them and ship anywhere in the country. But I think also just, again, sharing this mission with others and sharing what you learned here today. I also recommend folks follow us on social media and sign up for our newsletter to get more up-to-date or more updates, I should say, for our organization, including a webinar we're having next week. Was it? Yeah, a week from today at 3 p.m. Eastern, that will dive more into the tiny home community process. So if our folks are interested in that, we just sent out our newsletter announcing that event on Wednesday, February 11th, but we'll hopefully have a few other webinars throughout the year or learning opportunities for people to join to understand how we did this and or how we continue to do this and to learn from one another. And if you all have any questions after this, our email is info@benevolencefarm.org. But I want to thank y'all for the space, and I can answer questions, clarify anything, or add on as is needed.
Yeah, definitely. I was very highly intrigued whenever your project got sent to me, and I thought, I think my mind is so broad. And then I was like, why have I never thought about agriculture for people who have been incarcerated? Like, because I personally, and being partially disabled, I personally do know how agriculture is healing. And, we work a lot of it with our veterans, but just never, the thought never crossed my mind. And I thought, oh God, that is a great, great thing for us to be able to share. So in the chat, Dr. Tara asked, do you find that the program leads to your participants considering working in agriculture, after they're released from your program? And if they do, do you provide any kind of guidance to help them?
So I would say we have had some people work at local farms. We had one alumni who went into for a little while wildlife restoration, restoration, and what was the other one? In a nursery, a plant nursery as well. And so we do have some folks go into that, or like one of our staff pictured in that slide. She is a produce manager for a local general store, and so kind of adjacent. But I think most people are not necessarily going to work in the agriculture field just because of the need for some of the like higher pay or flexibility around scheduling, especially if they're reuniting with family. But I think what they do, what is more commonly taken away is like the skill sets to grow their own food. So while they may not be employed by agricultural industry or farm, we do hear a lot of our folks leaving with the understanding that they can grow their own food or come away with recipes for how to integrate some of these items, these food items into their diets. Or like I said with Mona, she tries to teach her kids now what she learned at the farm. And we had my predecessor, Lashana Austria, executive director before me. She is a farmer, and she would talk about how kind of her goal is to make people believe they could farm anywhere, even if it wasn't on multiple acres. She said your farm could be your windowsill or your balcony of your apartment. And so she tried to really stress ways people could bring farming to their home, no matter the size. But yeah, so very diverse. I would say, people kind of just. I think the other big thing is people's criminal records can be challenging in certain spaces. So sometimes our people do have to just kind of find the job that they can get, and it may not be in the industry that is ideal for them, but sometimes they have to start off at that point and build their way up into a more stability and more options then for pursuing jobs long term.
Yeah, yeah. We gotta like push that urban farming a little bit more. Like people don't have to have these huge acres. They can have little spots and produce quite a bit of food, like that. So I know I kind of thought the same thing that Mallory said here in the chat when you were talking about how they come out of prison, not healthy, basically. We didn't know that that was so common. I guess it is pretty bad, in
Yeah,
prison.
there. I don't have the exact statistic in my mind. I was thinking about research, looking it up, but I'm going to distract myself if I do that. But there have been longitudinal studies that for every year incarcerated, there's so many years of loss of life in your expected lifespan, because the experience of incarceration. So if you're in jail, a lot of jails you don't have access to the outdoors while you're in jail, and sometimes you can be there months to years before you go to a prison. And then once you do go to a prison, your movement is limited. You are again sleeping in really harsh conditions. Um, medical access is guaranteed, but usually a poor quality. And then the food, there's actually a book that was released about I think it's called Eating Behind Bars by an organization called Impact Justice in California. And Eating Behind Bars kind of just explores how, kind of like in the school cafeteria movement, of how we've just degraded the quality of food we give to kids. Like in prison, they're often like given food that will say on the box, not for human consumption. And so or food that's moldy or decaying, or may not meet, like if you have diabetes or other chronic health conditions, you're supposed to have that accommodation, but often then you just get the less food instead of the right food. And then there are, not necessarily in North Carolina that I know of, although I could be wrong, but there are prisons built on Superfund sites or in toxic areas, or like on previous dumps or landfills. And so that toxic exposure is there, but it is not uncommon for people who've experienced decades of incarceration to die within the first 5 years of their release. And that is unfortunately what happened to Deb. She died 4 years and 6 months. She was 6 months away from being off her parole, and died of mouth cancer. And so there are a lot of negative health outcomes. And people, like I said, if they're also can be developing even more severe mental health diseases. There's post-incarceration syndrome that can causal, like people are not, I guess I would say, like in some, prison is a disabling experience. You don't often hear people getting healthier. You might hear about them getting more fit, especially in men's prisons. But in terms of their combined mental and physiological health over time, it is pretty rare to hear about someone getting healthier in prison. They're often getting sicker when they come out.
Yeah. Yeah. Vicky says that she has worked with incarcerated women for half of her career. She said, how do you work with family members? And is there any space for women that have small children?
So we are a little bit different than other organizations in that, like the day someone gets out, we provide a cell phone for people to connect with their families, and a 30-day plan. A lot of, unfortunately, there's a lot of research to show that that family connection is really important, and there's some, I think, historical biases as to why people restrict communication with family in reentry or recovery programs. But we know that is often the first priority, especially for women with children, and over 50% of incarcerated women in prisons are mothers, and often of minor children. And so Mona, for example, who I mentioned a few times, she has 3 young kids when she got out, and she just spent the first day just talking to them on the phone for the first time, uninterrupted, without the messages you get when calling a loved one in prison, and without monitoring, without time restrictions, and also without having to pay exorbitant fees to talk to your loved ones, which is like multiple times more than we all pay for a phone bill. And then you're also making no money practically in prison, but expected to pay that anyway. So phone calls are very important for our folks coming home. We don't have anyone with children living on the property, and there's a few reasons for that. One is that in order to support people of all conviction types, we can't have children on the farm, but children can visit, and we certainly support and accommodate children visiting. A lot of them like to come visit the chickens. But honestly, when you spend all day working and living on the farm, almost all our folks want to go offsite with their family and get out into town, and so they're often hanging out with their families there, and getting picked up. But the other reason too, and this is something our formerly incarcerated mothers on our staff have described, is the moms needed that time for themselves to get their footing stable, so that they could be the best versions of themselves for their kids. And even if they were able to get their kids day one, which most of them weren't, like they wanted to have the confidence to have knowing they have a place in the community where their kids are going to be able to move into. They have a job they can support their kids in, and they feel like they've had the time to put their, own oxygen mask on and get their oxygen before adding kids into the mix.
Yeah. Chris has a comment here. She said she had worked in treatment centers for 10 years and wished they would have had a program like this, and says just sounds like a very wonderful program. Um, yeah, Vicky says the services available for women are very few compared to what is available for men. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think men still by like sheer volume of like number of people there are more men incarcerated. It's the scales that have really been thrown off. And so we kind of had these systems for generations for men. But I think a lot of people still don't think of women as being affected by incarceration. So as of now in North Carolina, there's only two reentry programs for over 3,000 women that accept people of all conviction types. So I mean, last year we weren't able to accept a single new resident because we were at capacity, and there were 3,000 women getting out of prison alone last year, but women are actually more affected by jail. But the cycles of jail can be so chaotic because you can be arrested and be in jail for a night and then like get out and then get like wrapped back into it for like 30 days. And then that it can kind of be an endless cycle that's hard to interrupt. And there are even fewer programs to support people in jail unless they're in substance use recovery. And then they usually have a few more options if they're in substance use recovery. But even then, methamphetamine is a drug that affects a lot of women, especially in our rural community in particular. And there's not a lot of recovery homes that can support meth recovery. And so that's another big gap. So there's certainly all this interconnected struggles that do make it harder to support women. And making sure to, I would also say like some reentry programs will say they serve people of all genders, which is great and needed. And a lot of women sometimes will refuse to go to a program run by men, or if they don't feel comfortable with men, because over 90% of incarcerated women have endured some sort of abuse or violence in their lifetime. And a lot of that we see that, even have to be careful at the farm with like people coming to the farm who are men in the spaces they occupy, because it can be triggering for some of our folks. So if you have those reentry services run by men, that works for some people, and we need it, and we need more of that. But I suppose what I'm saying is like I wish there was a system where we were kind of like trying to get people to come to us and saying, I know you have 12 other options, and we would love for you to come to benevolence. But right now it's like the opposite. People are like, my only option is benevolence harm, or my only option is this other group. And unfortunately that's true. That is still, we get a lot of messages from incarcerated men and their loved ones thinking we take men in, and we have some partners we can refer to, but a lot of those places have no capacity either. So it's really just not a great environment for people who don't have family support coming home.
Yeah. Now, Alberta wants to know, can those students incarcerated in detention centers be an initiative with your nonprofit agency?
I might need to know a little bit more about students incarcerated in detention centers. We have people in different educational programs incarcerated who exit our program and come to us. We don't as much work actively in prisons or jails unless we're building a relationship with people who are coming home to our program. But I'm happy to learn more about what that person's thinking.
Yes, yeah. Now, Jeremy says, because he has a history of working with incarcerated individuals, when you're speaking of jail, are you referring like to just county jail or is this state jail?
That's a good question, and it may be different in different states. So I know there's state jail in North Carolina. People kind of refer to that as the judiciary system within the prison, where people are tried for like infractions and things that happen while incarcerated. And I'm not so much talking about that process, and that's North Carolina specific. So I am mostly referring to county jails that are run by sheriff's departments.
Okay. Okay. And Kelly says, she says, I have worked with inmates as they transition back into the community, and the continuity of care of their mental health support stops at a time when they need it most. You probably see that as well.
Yeah, and for people in recovery too, it's also an incredibly risky time because the risk of overdose is 10
Yeah.
times higher for people exiting incarceration the first 2 weeks they come home, and mental health as well. But also if you're just getting out and you know where to, I mean, that's again that when I talk about women coming to benevolence saying like they have the place to breathe, like if you're just getting out with no support systems, like you're trying to figure out where to stay, where you're going to get your next meal. And even if you don't have schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or other like drugs or for which you need medications to manage some of those mental health conditions on top of therapy and all of that, like you're not even you can't even think about that often because you're just like, I'm hungry, I'm cold, or I need my next place to stay. And then even if you could get to a doctor or you might need an ID. We have like this issue right now with Medicaid transferring from prison to community care, and they're trying to work on some legislation to improve that process. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of people who say like reentry should start the day you're incarcerated, like your planning process. And the people in prisons who work in prisons should start that with incarcerated people at day one, because it does take sometimes that whole time to think about what life will be like after reentering. But then once you get out, like people are like, I think I'm ready. And then it's just, you can't know what to expect till you're out there. And there are a lot of reentry needs at that time.
Does anybody else want to unmute and ask any questions to
Yes, I
Kristen?
do.
Okay, go
Hi,
ahead.
hi, Kristen. My name is Asadia Fryer. I'm actually have done this work for 10 plus years. My last role, I was working under the mayor's office in Denver, and we had a $3.5 million budget. And instead of sending juveniles and women and men to jail or prison, we would have them go work on farms, and we had them receive stipends. So I do know all about this programming and everything that you are discussing and talking about. And I just wanted to commend you coming on here today to talk about this work. After the mayor I was working with is a new mayor, so I had to leave the administration. So I actually has been doing this work for 2 years, just working on different farms. And while you was talking, I did look up your programming and careers, because actually I just recently relocated to North Carolina, and I live in the area. So I did apply to the deputy director position while you were speaking. So hopefully you see my resume and we can discuss things further. If not, it's okay. But I just wanted to put my name out there because I did not know North Carolina had something like this. I knew I was doing this in Harris County and Houston, Texas, and I was doing this in Denver, Colorado, and I just moved to North Carolina. So I was trying to see, which places in North Carolina. So it was a blessing coming here today and hearing this presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank
That's
you.
wonderful.
That's great. Yeah, and I appreciate there's definitely also on the other side of things, diversion away from, like I said, a lot of these issues could be solved without sending people to prison and jail in the first place. So that's also
Yeah,
super important. And yeah, I see the common vocational rehab is really important, and a lot of our folks benefit from that in occupational therapy.
definitely. Well, everyone, we are at the end of the hour. We will get the email sent out usually either this afternoon or tomorrow with all of the speakers' information, and we'll get you the websites and the links that were posted in the chat. So go ahead and look for that. But again, if anybody has anything that they would like to share, just go ahead and email me, or you can go on the website and submit your project. We love to listen to all of these projects because you just don't know about them. They're so small and they're out there, unless you have a personal referral, sometimes we just can't find them. And this was definitely one that I had not heard of before. So we really appreciate you coming on, Kristen, and sharing what happens afterwards. So, all right, everyone, thank you so much, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.